is Amber Kapczynski. I'm from the All Resources, All Energy Incorporated. Today at the 2011 Energy Resource Conference, we are going to tell you about various options for energy resources. First, I would like to address the recent disaster in Japan that led to the destruction of a nuclear power plant. On March 11, 2011, an 8.9 magnitude earthquake shook off the coast of Japan, causing a tsunami that devastated the area. The immense earthquake also caused serious damage to the cooling system of one of the power plants off the coast. This led to more problems. I would like to point out that this is an extreme case when it comes to nuclear power plants. Japan, along with many other nations, including the US, rely on nuclear power plants for electricity. When there's a nuclear power plant damage or failure, it's widely publicized. The media loves to jump all over it. But there are very few cases where problems cannot be remedied. Nuclear power plants are not the only sources of energy that run into problems. Last year, on April 20th, the British Petroleum, or BP, oil company had an outdated piece of equipment that failed, which caused a massive oil spill off the Gulf Coast. To this day, almost an entire year later, there's oil found on the seafloor of the Gulf of Mexico, which disallows the organisms of the seafloor to replenish the ecosystem. There's also wind turbines that cause problems for wildlife. Bats and birds can't get around the wind farms, and they end up being killed by the turbines. The only solution is to use all of these resources. We can't depend on one in case it fails, and we can't have wind turbines all over the place. We'll have no air for our planes and our birds and other animals. So what we need to do is use all of these resources.
Good morning, my name is Kyle McCabe, here speaking on renewable resources. Our country has abundant alternative energy sources that make it easier while supporting our local economy. Green power from the sun, wind, hydropower, and geothermal sources are all sustainable and eco-friendly to our world around us. They also have the ability to save us money and hassle. Most systems require initial setup and occasional maintenance. They are relatively stable other than occasional maintenance and upkeep. Although initial setup may be high, they quickly pay for themselves. To not make use of these treasures is harmful to our planet, our pockets, and our world politics. Depending on the system and type size, solar power is good for over 30 plus years, paying itself off in 5 to 10 years. Wind power lasts 30 plus years as well, paying itself off in 15 years. Now please keep in mind that your energy bills are lowered by 50 to 90% once these are up and going. Geothermal breaks even in 8 years and can last a lifetime if installed properly. In 2010, 30% of the set costs were given back in federal tax credit. In our current 2011 year, you will be given 10% back if you decide to purchase any renewable resource. Renewable energy will never run out, ever. Unlike virtually every other form of energy, renewable energy, such as solar and wind power, will never deplete. That means 50 generations from now, renewable energy will be just as abundant as they are today. Unlike the past generations, upcoming societies will not wake up to the same problems that we have in front of us. We will never have to scurry for a new way to power our homes. We won't have to worry about increasing fuel prices. There will be no more searching for new places to drill or new mountaintops to push over. Renewable energies are the most environmentally sustainable power. They do not require mining or imploding mountains. There would be no more wars on politic battles or control in oil fields. There are thousands of mountains and rivers and forests destroyed every day in search of new deposits of fossil fuels. There are good job sustainability. The implementation of renewable energies would and is currently creating new jobs with higher demand. Being highly trained in building and maintaining these energy sources will provide a long-lasting job for 40 plus years for any employer looking for a stable job. The less dollars going out to foreign fuel, the more money is saved and rotates in our local communities. The investment spent in renewable energies used mainly for materials and workmanship rather than imports and politics.
Good morning, my name is Pete Winterstein. I represent the Fossil Fuel for Our Future Committee. The previous speakers have framed our nation's energy situation as problematic, in need of change, and even apocalyptic. They've used buzzwords like sustainability, pollution, global warming, and environmental degradation. First of all, let me remind you that it's you who are the polluters. The energy industry is acting on your behalf to sustain your lifestyles. Global warming is hugely contested and by no means a proven fact. We're going off brand new scientific methods and using events and observations from the past 50 years to describe a natural occurrence that follows a geologic timescale. For instance, 30,000 years ago, we'd be under a mile of ice right now. There's been no decisive evidence that connects greenhouse gas emissions undeniably to any change in global climate conditions. Even if global warming exists, most numbers I hear are shifts between 1 or 2 degrees of the global average. 1 or 2 degrees. These brainiacs spend 25 years in school and try to pull this garbage on us. Now let's forget about the scientists and look at what everyone else can see. Okay? UMass, this semester, had almost a record number of snow days. And if you remember, it snowed on April 1st. That's like the planet's biggest April Fool's prank, global warming. Okay? Last year in Washington, D.C., it was nearly shut down for over a week due to snow. People were seen cross-country skiing to get to the grocery store. We've also heard about the hypothesis that we're running out of fossil fuels. Did you know that we effectively have more fossil fuels available to us today than ever before? It's due to new extractive techniques, technologies, and discoveries. Hydraulic fracturing, for instance, is an extremely effective way of gathering natural gas, which accounts for nearly a quarter of our energy consumption. Naysayers claim that it damages watersheds and is highly destructive of local ecosystems and residential properties. Despite some protests, our dear leader, President Obama, and his administration have given this method the green light and rightly declared it to be safe and important for the nation's energy independence. ANWR, or the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, is a pristine tract of land in Alaska that contains vast amounts of oil. Likewise, developing this resource could help us gain greater energy independence. The green nutcases think that it's fragile land, an important habitat for caribou and polar bears. It seems pretty harsh and tough to me, though. And anyways, survival of the fittest, right? Another example is the oil sands in Canada, a newly discovered resource. Rapidly advancing technologies are making extraction viable and economically sound. Sure, it's in Canada, it's theirs, right? But really, Canada's just America's hat. We also have access to oil in the oceans and the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, oil spills are naturally occurring. They've been happening for millions and millions of years. The planet is used to dealing with them. There's bacteria that occur naturally in the ocean that eat oil. Finally, we've got the issue of mountaintop removal in the Appalachian Mountains for coal extraction. Mountaintop removal is much more safe and efficient than previous coal extracting techniques. When an area is used up, the land can be restored and converted into valuable agricultural land or developed into new communities. Another issue with our current energy infrastructure is that we need it. The rapid advancement the U.S. has experienced in the last century was brought to you and made possible by fossil fuels. 78% of our energy consumption comes from petroleum, coal, and natural gas. Renewables comprise less than 1/10 of that, 7.7%. From extraction to processing to delivery, millions of families in the U.S. are relying on fossil fuel industry for employment. If fossil fuels were to disappear tomorrow, these millions would be without jobs, money, or food. The entire country would be utterly crippled. Furthermore, as the world's superpower, our citizens have enjoyed a quality and standard of life greater than any other in the world. We complain about equal rights in the workplace, cost of higher education, and how sex ed should be taught. Most people from most other countries are not so fortunate. They have to worry about what to eat and staying safe. And maybe, if they're fortunate, becoming literate. In the US, we're used to getting what we want and will not tolerate any less. We pay for our lush lifestyle with the rich natural resources God has given America. People are always talking about how high gas prices are. The real cost of a gallon is somewhere around $15. But through taxes, we pay much less at the pump due to subsidies. Government keeps the price down through subsidies paid to oil companies. The argument is that we pay a higher price anyway through the taxes that fund these subsidies. For the most part, this isn't true. The rich pay higher taxes and contribute more to the subsidies, so the majority of Americans pay the price at the pump, so we can afford it. Subsidies are socially responsible and a good thing. It's not any different than having federally funded higher education.
Well, we've heard from both very strong sides, but I think that there needs to be motivation for utilizing each type of resource for energy. One way of doing this is through subsidies and taxes, like Pete just mentioned. The US is behind in its use of renewable energies compared to many other nations across the world. Germany is the most productive when it comes to renewable energy. They use wind farms, solar panels, and hydropower to supply their nation with energy. France and Belgium use 75 and 51% nuclear power to provide energy for their nation, while the US only uses 20% nuclear power for electricity. I also believe that these European nations are ahead of the US in their energy resources because they require oil companies to pay taxes, which in turn causes the price of gasoline at the pump to be higher. If the US taxed their oil companies, gas would be close to $15 a gallon, as previously mentioned, because the US subsidizes the funding for the oil companies. Now, I don't really want to pay $15 a gallon with my fully gasoline car, but if I had a car that I could charge at my house or was charged by the sun with solar panels, I wouldn't be paying as much as I do even now for gasoline. This is where we need to become innovative and create functional cars that run on solar power and electricity. The US currently uses fossil fuels for over 75% of its energy needs. That number can decrease if we can increase the use of renewable power. How many of you drive a car that uses gasoline? Yeah, I don't think very many people actually have hybrids or fully electric cars. How many of you live in a home that uses oil for heat? All right, how about an electric stove or an electric hot water heater? Okay, what if you didn't have to stop at the gas station on the way to work because your car was plugged in overnight? What if you didn't have to wait for the oil truck to come to your house in the middle of winter and you forgot to pay the oil bill because you have solar panels that also heat your house? All these things are possible if we disperse the need for energy across many different resources. Relying on one form of energy is no longer realistic. We must make use of all the resources available, including renewable and non-renewable. The use of energy resources does not have to be something that is only for corporations. You can use your own energy resources. There are towns in other countries that are completely self-sustaining with energy to spare. There's an island in Denmark that relies completely on wind turbines. This island is not covered with wind farms, and there aren't wind farms spewing out into the ocean off the coast. People have their own wind turbines on their own property for their own farms and for their community use. Imagine inviting a friend over to check out your wind turbine. This is a possibility in the United States. We just have to go for it. And we can't stop using the fossil fuels that we have set up for our systems. We need to wean them out, and it's going to take time.
For my last part here, I would like to tell you some brief pictures and describe them to you and how renewable resources really are the only way to go. In the 1970s, the country's oil supplies were disrupted during the oil embargo from Arab petroleum export companies. Since then, our dependence on oil has increased and rather than decreased. It is time to stop this trend. Fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas are in limited supply. Depending on these finite resources is a huge misstep. These fuels are not only expensive but harmful and directly impact our planet's environment. Both old and new techniques for harvesting these fuels are so hazardous, it is amazing that countries allow them to destroy their natural landscapes. Mountaintop removal is a newer technique for coal mining. This process is blasting 800 vertical feet of a mountain into rubble. The coal company can access the coal easier and safer. This process requires many tons of explosives. The rubble is then dumped into an adjacent valley, destroying the vegetation and animals around it. The water source and all around it are destroyed. On top of completely destroying the natural habitat, the nearby valley, which did provide for drinking water, is now polluted and destroyed. Most were originally used. The air pollution from these sites affects many towns nearby as well. Linked to this, gallbladder disease, asthma, cancer. Any populations downwind or near it is at risk. Nuclear energy is unstable and probably the most dangerous form of energy. There is potential for something to go wrong with any form of energy products. However, for nuclear plants, when one thing goes wrong, it affects the whole world. After a meltdown, radiation can affect the entire planet, making it unlivable for many years. On top of the dangers of meltdown, nuclear plants create hazardous waste and plutonium. Plutonium is used to make bombs. Both need to be handled carefully and stored in extremely well-protected facilities. Some proposed dump sites include the area near Yucca Mountains in Nevada. These sites quickly fill out. We all know a long-term plan for a planet cannot include constantly filling holes and valleys with radioactive waste. The contaminants are deadly for 24,000 years. A nuclear plant is not stable, not sustainable, taking too much energy to store and maintain, while all the byproduct of this needs to be cleaned up. In '86, when reactor number 4 in Chernobyl, Soviet Union, 30 people were killed instantly. 300 people had radiation poisoning. 14,000 miles away in Scotland, radiation was 10,000 times higher than the norm. This accident used thousands of deaths from cancer, and it cost the Soviet Union 3 times the possible economic benefit from all the nuclear plants in their whole country. Alternative renewable resources are truly the only healthy way of the future.
These renewables sound flashy. Don't be fooled. We've been hearing about wind and solar energy and a few other things. How do these translate to our situation? Is everyone supposed to have a little windmill on top of their car? And how will solar power heat our homes at night during a snowstorm? Using ethanol and other biofuels will make prices of food skyrocket because farmers will sell their crops to the highest bidder. Hydropower ruins riparian ecosystems, and its reach for electricity is very limited. Nuclear power is a silent killer, can pollute and irradiate our air and water without us knowing. Fossil fuels are known, understood, stable, and in use now. The whole infrastructure of the United States is built around them. Let's keep it that way. If there is any real danger in our current energy use trends, don't worry. The U.S. is a country of winners. We've faced crises before, and solutions have always presented themselves. Firewood, for instance, in Massachusetts used to be a scarce commodity back when the state was 80% clear cut. Look outside now, there's trees everywhere. At the turn of last century, one of the biggest problems facing cities was pollution from horse manure. Streets were covered with it. It was a catastrophe. People had no idea of how to take care of it. Since the advent of the automobile, we can barely imagine such an issue. We are the capitalistic model for the world. We will improvise, adapt, and overcome. Thank you.
We've explored many types of energy resources today in our debate, each side making a good argument, but we need to focus on a way to move forward. We cannot dwell on the problems of the past. We cannot point a finger at each other because we are all to blame for not having solutions to these problems sooner. What we can do is move forward with the new innovations and plans to help implement the use of all resources available to us today. We cannot live without energy. We are too reliant on it, but we can put our heads together to move forward. On behalf of the 2011 Energy Resource Conference, I thank you all for joining us today.